Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Garden Oasis, located near Coggon in east central Iowa. We're going to learn and hear about some new and favorite farm equipment for use on a commercial vegetable farm. Today, we're live from the farm with farmer TD Holub, who owns and operates Garden Oasis, where he raises vegetables and pastured chickens on about 10 acres. Garden Oasis market streams, the market streams at Garden Oasis usually include a weekly CSA, as well as institutional wholesale at local schools, grocery stores, and local businesses. And we are currently on the acreage where TD lives with his family, which is about a mile down the road from a couple different sites where land where he farms and where he grows his produce. So we are going to talk about some exciting and really interesting equipment that TD uses on his farm here. So my name is Jacqueline Venersensky. I'm PFI's horticulture coordinator, and I'm here with a couple of my colleagues from Practical Farmers of Iowa. We have Emma and we have Jason behind the camera, and we are working with Megan, who's running things behind the scenes for us. So thanks very much to my team today. We are also going to be introducing TD here in just a minute. Thank you so much for joining us today, though. We're excited that you could be here with us. And if you have questions, please go ahead and toss them in the chat, and I can feed them to TD, and he can answer things for you if you have specific things that you want to know. So we are excited to hear what kinds of things you want to hear about. And we'll work them into our conversation. So, or you can also just, pop in the chat and say hello as well. So, without further ado, TD Holub. TD owns and operates Garden Oasis Farm with his wife Sarah out here near Coggon. On about 10 acres, like I said, they have pastured chickens, a market CSA, where they do farm-side pickup, and they also sell to grocery stores and restaurants. TD has a background in human health and physiology.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. And think about that for a second. It's been a while.
And receiving a degree from the University of Iowa, he has interests in nutrition, holistic health, and farming, and he has the experience of growing up on a farm, and that is inspired him to start his own farming operation. He began his first production season in 2013.
Yep, 2013.
On this farm outside Coggon, north of Cedar Rapids, and is now in his...
This is going to be year number 9.
Ninth year of operation. And I also found, I hope it's okay that I read this, but the guiding vision of the farm is that everyone should have access to safe, healthy, and affordable food from their own regional location. Putting people before profits, we hope to be a part of a much bigger food movement that educates and empowers people about the power of local and sustainably grown food.
Yes.
All right, those are great ideas that we can all get behind. So, the first piece of equipment that we are going to start with here today is this rinse conveyor that's over here to the side. TD, well, I'll let you talk about it, and we're going to go ahead and kick off with some operations. So we're going to go ahead to give you guys an idea of what we're talking about. This is a produce washer. It's a rinse conveyor, and we're going to go ahead and kick off with running some produce through it, and then we'll talk through the different components.
Yep. So this is an AZS rinse conveyor, and I got this, I guess, about. Last year was my first full season using it, so this will be our second, and it's saved us a bunch of time. But I'm going to get it started so you guys can kind of see how it runs here. A little quick note about it. This end here is known as the low pressure, high volume, and then this is the high pressure, low volume, which will make sense once we kind of get going here for a little bit. But we cleaned just about everything in this, so we got some kale here ready to go, some summer squash, cucumbers, and then we'll run some kind of dirty potatoes through it to kind of show you how it all works. But here we go. So you can kind of see right now it's set kind of slow. We can mess with this where we can turn it up to where it goes a lot faster, or we can slow it down to where it goes really, really, really slow. But we found this setting works pretty good with the kale. So I don't know if you guys want to peek in there to see what's kind of happening, but on this end here, you can see that it just A lot of volume of water, kind of acts like a pre-wash essentially. So if you imagine this thing is like a car wash, this is that first entry where it kind of gets some of the first stuff off, and then kind of works its way through and gets a little cleaner by the time it gets down to this end. Kind of see it just making its way here. Now we're gonna have a nice clean bunch of kale. Hard to see with my hand right there. It's getting pretty soaked. So that's really nice. You can get a nice fresh rinse at the end, especially if you're doing things like rain and stuff like that. Kind of gets you that little extra moisture that you want to store a little bit better. You know, when you're putting it back and you're walking. But you can see here we're running some summer squash through there. It wasn't too dirty to start with. But even if it's got, you know, a fair amount of dirt on it, running it through with no pressure like that, it cleans them pretty well. Especially if they're just dusty or you're a little bit worried you might have, you know, some bugs or something that you want to get any material that they're leaving on there off. But it cleans it very well. And then you just kind of catch them here, double check them.
That's the end of what I put through.
A few cucumbers here. I'm going to shut this.
Hey folks, we're back. Sorry for that interruption. We just had a little stream interruption here in our feed. TD's going to continue telling us about the rinse conveyor.
Yeah, so sorry, I don't know, I guess where I cut off, but I guess the story here is there's several different adjustments you can make depending on what kind of produce is going through. So you kind of saw how we ran it with just stuff that needs a rinse like that. So here, I'm going to show you guys something that's like a little bit more dirty. It's going to do a little bit more work. So these are freshly dug potatoes. We got these out of the field today. The skin's still a little bit tender. So you got to kind of be careful when you're washing these that you're not destroying them. The high pressure on here, if turned all the way up, is definitely a little bit too high where it'll actually just skin the potatoes. So that was one thing that's kind of unique about this. If you kind of see down here, which it might be kind of hard to see, But this is the pressure washer motor here. And there's a little dial on top, and you can basically set the PSI of the high pressure end anywhere between 500 and 1,000. So if it's a crop that can really tolerate a lot of pressure, you turn it up. If it's something like these potatoes, we'll actually turn it down. But I'll get this started, and then I'll kind of show you how we do these. We use these bread crates so that the potatoes don't kind of spread out in there, and they're a little bit easier to handle. This little part is a little bit louder, so I'll try not to talk a whole lot. But we'll run these through here, and I'll kind of show you how that works too. So this one is going to have the high pressure end on, so when we come around to this end, you'll be able to see those spinning in there. And I should say that on both ends, the water is actually coming from top and bottom. So there's a jet on the bottom that's shooting up, on top down, and the same over here. So I'll get this started. So as you can see now on this end, we got this thing up here that spins. And all that is two high pressure nozzles on the top and bottom, and they kind of point opposite directions, so it just makes that little bar spin up there. But it's pretty effective and gets a nice coverage in there. You kind of see the potatoes coming through there. What I like to do is kind of shake them up a little bit, and then I'll kind of push them back in just a little bit so they get a second little quick pass. There you go. Those come out pretty clean with just one little pass through there. You can kind of see what they look like. So that's taking care of pretty much all the dirt. If we need to, we can always take these crates and just put them right back through. Even doing this 2 or 3 times through this machine is a lot faster than hand washing them. Anybody that's growing vegetables out there knows kind of how much a pain the new skins are on the potatoes. But you can kind of see here, you know, while we have some that, I think that's actually our harvester that's doing that. For the most part, they're coming out nice and clean. These are definitely good enough for us to bag, throw in the CSA share. And like I said, if we need to, we can kind of run that stuff through again. So that's kind of how this thing works. I don't know if there's any questions or anything specifically about how it runs, but if there's not anything on the specifics of it, I'll show you guys one more cool thing about it, and then I'll explain how it all works, the different settings, as well as some of the different things that you can do for it. But this thing here, so you can adjust all these, any of the different things that are shooting water out. So this can go up or down, that can go up or down. But I'm gonna start it up again, and then you guys will see why I really love it, especially for people growing vegetables. So you cleaned all your produce, you refilled that thing with water, you got your harvest totes. They fit right in there, and you can actually turn this pressure all the way back up. We got our tomato crates we haven't used yet this year. You can see they're a little dusty, a little dirty. We haven't used them yet. We can actually set those right in here. We can set these bread crates in there, any of these totes, anything like that, and we'll actually just run those through for a nice clean rinse. So then you end up with a nice tote, nice and clean. And set it wherever you need to dry. And then there's our tomato crate, nice and clean now. So yeah, that is how this thing works. It can actually work on just about any kind of vegetable you can imagine. So we've run lettuce through it. You can see the kale, so all those greens, Swiss chard. There's herbs you can run through there when we're doing like our spring onions. A little trick we found is if you cut the top, we got hailed on, so we had to cut all the tops off. So if you cut the tops off and then throw all those bulbs in here with the pressure on, it loosens that skin. And then by the time they come out the end, it's just a quick peel and then everything's clean. We can use it on winter squash, sweet potatoes, carrots. You can use it on bunched items like beets and things like that. We do bunched radishes through it, turnips, and a bunch of different things like that. So.
This is
a lot of stuff.
This is super fun to watch. This has been very exciting to look through. You were talking a little bit earlier about how it has affected your labor. Like you feel like that's where the biggest, I mean, aside from your comment before saying that getting the crates washed was almost like enough to
almost justified it.
Almost justifies it. But can you also talk a little bit about how it has affected your labor and your sort of processes for packing day and things like that?
So a big thing about this is that the speed's set for you. So if you got somebody kind of new working, they don't know how to handle kale versus lettuce versus, a head of cabbage. The way we used to clean it in the sinks, that can kind of get a little dangerous if you got people in there that are, being really not very gentle on the lettuce, breaking leaves off, things like that. This is very standard. You set it in one way and then it's coming out the end. So basically one person feeds it, one person catches it. Or if you want, if we have like an extra person, we'll actually run somebody catching, put it on the table, and then we can pack off of that table. I wish I had an actual hour amount or a dollar amount that was saved, but I can tell you the way we used to do things, and this isn't necessarily just indicative of this machine. We've changed a lot of things on this farm, but it used to take us a crew of about 5 to 6 to do everything we needed in a week. And right now, like this week, it's me and one other person, and then we sprinkle in a third person there sometime, or for only about 10 hours a week. So our labor has gone way, way down, and this is a really big portion of that. Not to mention just the little 5-minute, 10-minute increments that are saved by not having to set up your sinks. You don't have to fill up several different sinks. You don't have to drain them and refill them. This is all kind of self-contained, which I'm going to show you guys. And then when you clean it, it's just one nice flush, clean it out, you can refill it, and then you're back using it again. So it's a very nice thing. And as I was saying with this conveyor, if you have somebody here that's new, that doesn't necessarily know they can keep up with it, we can slow it down a little bit so they can get used to it. Or if it's, standard, it's the crew that's here all the time, we can turn that speed up just a little bit. You can't run it too fast, otherwise it's not cleaning as good as what you would want it to. But other than that, it's pretty effective and real easy to use, and has really saved us a lot of labor. I can tell you that on most wash pack days, we're washing, packing, and the stuff's going out the same day, where that used to be nearly impossible. We wouldn't have enough time to do all that. So we can set this thing up. Last week we sold about 200 bunches of kale. We had all that kale collards, all of it cleaned and packed within about half an hour using this machine, just because it's so quick and easy.
That's impressive.
We can grab right off the line and right into the tote, so it's been really nice.
Very good. Well, okay, so let's say we've gone through and you've done all of your stuff. You've washed everything, you've run your totes through. What do? You were talking a little bit about like sort of maintenance and things at the end of the day.
Yep.
Let's go through that.
Yep. So this thing, when you go to drain it, kind of cool. It just
And
opens right up.
While you're
Yeah.
getting to that, there, TD, there is one question coming in from Gavin from Crescent.
Mm-hmm.
Where does all the water runoff go, and is that a little filter on the right side? I think he was talking about that thing right there.
So this little filter here is just to catch any kind of stuff that's in your fresh water, little chunks of rust or whatever. This is actually not a filter. This has a float in it, and what it does is when you hook your hose up, this feeds the high pressure end, and it's actually a safety that's built in. So when you hook the hose up, it fills this up, and if for some reason you forget to hook the hose up and you start it, it'll drain all this water, and as soon as that float goes down, it shuts the whole thing off so you don't burn out any of your pump motors or anything like that. As far as the water that's coming out of the machine, this blue hose, and you can just run that wherever you want. I have it run out there today since we're not doing anything major. We can run it through a drain or however it is that you want to do that. But the water that's going through on the low pressure side, so what's going through up here, that is a recirculated water. So this tank, the underside of this, is filled with water. And what we do to kind of make sure their water is not getting too dirty and trying to do a little bit of safeguarding with it, we'll put a little bit of fertilizer, put a little bit of sanitizer in the water so that our water is sanitized. We use Tsunami for that. So we'll put that in that water, and then we have our freshwater rinses at the end. You can also put like a stock tank at the end with your sanitizer in it and dip it that way, or you could do that at the beginning, I suppose, as well. But at the end, you would get the true effect of all of that. But in regards to the water that's in here, the way it works is this little recirculation pump down here will just take that water up to the front, and then when I drain this, you guys will kind of see here. So I'm gonna drain this. So all the water is just plumbed into this. It drains relatively quickly. And then once it drains, you'll be able to kind of see the standard cleanup process that we have with it. But while we're waiting for that to drain, this is a pretty easy thing to maintain. The only thing you really got to watch out for is if the weather is getting cold, you want to make sure that you're completely draining these pumps so that nothing freezes in there, unless you're in a heated building, of course. Another couple things to consider, not necessarily related to the maintenance, but wherever you're housing the thing, we were actually thinking about building a little addition over here in our shop to have a processing room. But our ceilings wouldn't have been tall enough for this thing. Something I didn't consider, when this is opened, your ceiling needs to be at least about 10 foot tall, whereas otherwise it'll fit through like my cooler door, which is, you know, a standard door, when everything's down. So that's something to consider, but as far as maintenance goes on things, everything's very, very simple. The pumps, all the materials that go with that are all standard. You can get them, you know, pretty much anywhere you can get any of that kind of equipment. These are sold through Mulch up in Charles City or Pennsylvania, but a different company makes them, but they source them through there. But those guys, you can get all the parts from them as well. But you can also go to your local, you know, for us it'd be like Sprayland and Marion would have the stuff to fix most of this, besides the electric motors and things like that. All the electrical components are very standard. It looks kind of scary in there, but it's nothing major. All stuff that you can, you know, run to wherever your major electrical supplier is, and they have all that stuff. So it's pretty easy to maintain, nothing to really worry about there. These pumps and everything are housed under it so they don't get wet when you're spraying the thing down or anything like that. But so this is getting low. I'll show you guys how this works. The water that we were using wasn't very dirty. But as I was saying, the water is getting sucked in down here, recirculated to the front, so then all that dirt that's washing off, it gets, the water has to make its way over these little dams. So if you're really running a lot of produce through there, you'll start to notice that there's a big amount of sediment up here, maybe a little less here, a little less there. So that means it's doing its job, but kind of just like, it's just a way to kind of filter some of that dirt out before it gets to these filtering screens. So this is for the big stuff that might go in there. You can see it's catching some leaves, stuff like that. Just shake that out, get that clean. You pull these out, so then all your water comes through. And then your final screen down here fits a little bit tight. But this is the fine one that catches all the little stuff before it gets into here, which is what's sucking in the recirculated water. So you take all that out, and then just a hose, spray from the top. It all drains into here, and then it's on its way out. You refill it, and you're back in business. There's a few valves and stuff like that that you can open up to really drain things. I better move these first. I guess it's not a big deal, but there's like a little thing over here where you can drain this low pressure end. So when you're winterizing it, you just want to open this up. And then there's also a couple inside the actual machine in here. But while it's not on, you might be able to kind of see in there a little bit better. It's very, very simple, but that's what I really like about it, is that there's not a whole lot to it. It's just all stainless steel, and then the few components that move it, and then your actual washing pumps and motors. So it's a pretty easy thing to work with. You got a little catch tray here, catches all your dirt and stuff that might be coming off before it actually makes it into the conveyor. And then, like I said, you can set a ton of different things between the height of the water, the speed of the conveyor, the strength of the pressure, and all that kind of stuff when you're working with stuff. But I would highly recommend if you're a producer looking for just kind of an all-in-one type thing. I mean, we've cleaned tomatoes in it. We were stuck between this and like a brush washer. Landed on this because I thought we could clean a lot more things in it. Turns out that seems to be the case, because anything that can be cleaned in a brush washer, we can definitely clean in here, plus a lot more.
You're saying it's really good for like that really delicate stuff that doesn't tolerate a brush washer so well.
And it works. I mean, if depends how you're growing your lettuce. We tend to wash everything regardless. Just makes me feel a little bit better, and I like to get a little water on stuff, because as long as you're storing things correctly, I feel like that's gonna kind of make things just a little more hydration. It'll look a little bit nicer. So being able to have something like this where we can have a little bit more control over what we're doing versus, kind of setting up a bunch of sinks and letting everybody kind of go do what they want. Anybody that's had a crew knows that one person
Okay, we went ahead and moved outside. We were inside TD's shop over there, and we think some of the steel was getting in the way of some of our reception. So we've gone ahead and bounced outside, and we're going to talk about some of the equipment that we use in the field. So we have 3 pieces here.
Yeah, so this is called a Perfecta. Unverfirth is the manufacturer. So what this thing is it replaced our rototiller. So I was having a lot of trouble with our ground crusting. Rototillers are super slow. You're driving in maybe first, second gear, and it just takes a lot of time. It's destroying your soil. It's usually not the greatest thing to use, and probably the thing I hear most producers complain about the most is the use of a rototiller. So I had done some research and arrived on this thing, and it's as easy as it looks. It's just a field cultivator. The main difference is you can choose between different size tines. So I went with the heavy duty ones that you can purchase. You can buy a medium duty and a light duty. So these are the heavy duty ones. And then you can put whatever size sweeps you want on it. This one was the standard, I think 7 inches. So the soil obviously passes through there, breaks it all up. You can see how many tines there are. The reason you don't see, the row crop guys using these, if you got corn residue, stuff like that, you can see how close these are. So the flow can get really jammed up if you got a lot of material in the field. Works better on black dirt or slightly, it'll still work in a cover crop, but you need to hit it with probably a chisel or a disc first, and then let it kind of die off a little bit and then run through with this. But as you can tell, the tines are spaced such that pretty much everything in this path is getting hit with a part of that sweep. So then all that comes back through here. This is a leveling bar. So all it does is kind of breaks up the clods a little bit, and it levels the soil out so it's in line with the rest of this thing. And then the most important part, or the thing I think is the most important part of this, is this rolling basket. And for anybody that's ever seen anybody out, in corn, soybean fields using the big cultivators with the rolling baskets, you can see how it just chops up that soil, throws it up, and that's exactly what this does. And it kind of texturizes the soil, almost packs it back in a little bit, but leaves enough texture, unlike a tiller where it's leaving a flat soil bed. So then it stops that crusting generally. So we switched to this. Within the first year, our soil stopped crusting and we didn't have any of those issues again. On the other side of things, it's so much faster than rototiller. So basically as fast as your field allows, you can drive this thing. So I pretty much go about 6-7 miles an hour with this tractor. That's a 75 horse. If you run this thing all the way down pretty deep, it takes all of that tractor to operate it. But it works very, very well. I wish we were out in the field so I could show you how that one works. If you check out my Facebook or Instagram, I've done videos of that so you can see how it does, but it almost leaves exactly what a soil bed would look like from a tiller, just textured a little bit better. So we get our soil ready with that. That makes our seed bed. This is our water wheel transplanter, pretty standard for anybody that knows how a water wheel works. You load your plants up on here, on these racks, water plus fertilizer, just water, whatever you want to do. You got adjustable valves to control how much water is coming out. Spikes, you can adjust size of spikes, the distance between plants. So this particular setup right now is going to leave me 14 inches in row between plants, but you can do it as close as 5 or as far apart as I think like 46 inches or something like that if you're just running one spike or something like that. So we use this to plant any transplant that we got. So beginning of the year, onions, we'll pre-poke the holes with a little bit of water at 5-inch spacing and then go back and just poke the onions in by hand because it's too hard to keep up. Potatoes, we'll actually use this next piece of equipment. It has some hilling discs. We'll actually open up a very small trench and then run this thing through it, plant the potatoes, and then all of our transplants throughout the whole summer are used with this. The thing I like about this the most is that it makes planting tolerable for several hours for whoever's operating. One person can do conceivably all the planting, which is kind of how our farm is working right now, where I just have one person riding this, and he's literally probably planted the whole entire 4 acres of the field that we have. And it's, you know, it's broke up between several different days and weeks and months, but just the point is that you're comfortable sitting on this seat. You can load up 18 standard 10 by 20 trays on here, and then these tanks will give you enough, depending on how much water you're putting on it, enough to do, you know, 20, 30 trays, so you just have to transport some extra down. But in addition to it standardizing planting so that everything's at the same speed, same spacing, it does all of that for us without us actually having to do anything. It makes it all just happen. In addition to that, the fact that it puts water in with the plant at the time of planting allows us to say, if we think it's going to rain within a couple days, which never happens anymore, but if you think that, you can run a little less water. If you don't think it's going to rain for a few days, you run a little bit more water, and you eliminate that need to plant something and then just run to get your irrigation equipment, you know, out as fast as you can. You know, on our big field, we do a lot of dry, or it's pretty much all dry land. We can transplant all of our plants. You know how dry this spring has been. Last fall was very dry. We've literally had transplants set out with the water wheel that haven't got rain for at least 3 weeks that survive. And they don't grow the best at first, but as soon as they get that first rain, they've had their roots established. So the roots are taking establishment right away because you're giving it that shot of water when you plant it. So everything's planted. We got to weed it. This is our Williams tool system field cultivator, or not field cultivator, just a Williams tool system cultivator. The main function of this that I use it for are the tine weeders on the back here. So the way a tine weeder works is that it doesn't differentiate between the actual crop that you want and the weeds. It just will rip out any weed that's in the white thread stage, or any plant for that matter. So you got to be a little bit careful if you're, you know, just had seeded beets or something, for example, and you want to run this through there. You're probably better off pulling up the tines on the actual row of beets. But as soon as those beets are, you know, maybe 2 inches tall, and they're established pretty well, you actually just put all these tines down, and same as that perfecta, you just run about as fast as you can.
You were talking about pulling up the tines. Can you demonstrate what that involves?
You can see these ones are already up, so they're just set to where you can set them wherever you want. So for me and my tractor setting, I usually run these things on 7 down here. If you go too much farther, it almost doesn't catch the ground to where it's doing anything. And if you don't do it quite that much, it's not aggressive enough to rip out some of the slightly bigger weeds. But as soon as the weeds are established in any shape, this thing does not work really at all. But until that point, it's great, because we use this for our sole form of cultivation until basically when we got hailed on about 3 weeks ago. So about 2 weeks ago, this was our only form of cultivation, and our fields were spotless.
And you said that was about twice a week, right?
Yep, about twice a week if you can. You just don't want those weeds to get set. And even if they're a little bit bigger, if you run through it twice a week, it's usually catching something. So it'll either disrupt them to where they grow so slow that you can get in there and you're going to wipe them out with something else, or you hit them a couple times in the same week, they get ripped out. A side note on this, something I learned this year, at least I think I learned about this year, is that when you have no moisture coming down, so no rain, not irrigating a whole lot, this saves a lot of soil moisture because you're not actually turning up the soil. All you're doing is raking through the soil. So we actually hadn't had rain for about a month, and I dug 4 inches down and the dirt under there still clumped together. And that was after just using this all summer. So I think it really saves a lot of soil moisture because it's not mixing your soil up.
That's a really, you mentioned that once before. I think that's a really interesting point and an important one.
It's something I had never even thought of, quite honestly.
We're getting down to our last couple of minutes, so let's run over to our last piece of equipment here.
So this was new last year. This is a Czech and Maggie, I think is how you pronounce it actually. It's from Italy. But this particular one's the SP100. They have an SP50, which is, it doesn't weigh as much, and it's like a, I don't know, it doesn't shoot off to the side. It shoots right to the back. But this thing, the one I got here, you can kind of see when you're looking at the hitch, it's offset. So you can do, we grow potatoes on 30-inch rows. So this thing is offset, so you're doing one row at a time when you're using a bigger tractor. Well, I'll start this thing up here real quick.
There we go.
So it's super simple, but those front coulters here, these just cut in front of the row. This little shoe right here picks the soil up. And as you drive forward, the soil just pushes the rest of the soil through with your potatoes. And then these two little shaker pans just shake the dirt out, and then to put the potatoes over there in your wheel track. We use it on potatoes, so those ones we washed up in the shop, we harvested this morning with this. And then you can do onions with it, which we've used. It works really well for onions. You wouldn't think onions are that hard to where you really need it. But if you think about not having to actually hand pull 10,000 onions out of the ground,
seems like it has its advantages.
It makes a little bit of a difference. And the other nice thing about it is that it sifts the dirt out. So if you pull onions up and it's a little wet, it actually shakes all the dirt out of the roots, so you're not actually doing that yourself. So that is this thing here. And I don't necessarily have a labor savings time on it, but I can tell you this morning we did 250-foot rows of red Norlands, and they were dug and in the totes within about half an hour. So it's a huge difference from using like a middle buster.
That's really fantastic. This has been really great. So I think that covers the pieces. I mean, I know we could go on talking forever about these because they're pretty exciting. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff, and I love TD. I love the like sort of systemic like problem-solving approach you take to adopting these new technologies and these new tools on your farm, because I can tell that it's made a big difference.
Oh yeah, most definitely
in your production. So we are going to go ahead and wrap things up since we're kind of at the end of our time here. But thank you so much. This has just been wonderful, and we appreciate your time and expertise this afternoon so much. I want
to say one thing.
Please.
So for anybody that's looking at maybe getting into buying equipment, doesn't know anything about it, one, you can always ask me if it's something you think I might have some information on. But two, I think it's important to note, like, I didn't just buy all this one year. It was definitely a progression. So it started off with, a way to plant and a way to weed it. Got pretty good at that. And then we figured, well, now our soil prep is what's taking the longest. So we bought that instead of the rototiller. So it sped that up. And then this last year, we've just accumulated all the equipment that we need for field production. And we're, harvesting packs take a long time. So we bought that rinse conveyor in there, which I should say, if you're going to buy one of those right now, I think they're probably close to $10,000. I found that one used, very lightly used. It'd only been used a year, so I only had to pay about half that. But even at the rate that it was at before the material prices went up in 2021, at like $8,000, I would say it's going to pay for itself probably within the first couple seasons at the very least, depending on how much you're using it. But for us, the money we spent on it, I think I was happy enough the first 2 weeks.
You found a gold mine with that used piece there, so that's always something that's really good to consider. But any other final notes?
Well, I'm a big proponent of, if you think something's going to make it better, try it. If it doesn't, you can probably sell it.
Might work well for someone else.
Yeah, exactly. Not everybody's farm's the same. Like I was telling you earlier, we've sold a couple pieces of equipment that haven't worked well for us for our setup, but that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. It just means that the way we're doing things here is a little bit different, so we're trying to get the pieces that fit us best. So that's kind of what we've landed on for now. Come back in a couple of years, I'll probably have some more stuff.
Well, I hope we won't have to wait that long, but I really appreciate you having us over here today. So thanks so much to all of our viewers for joining us live from the farm over here at Garden Oasis by Coggon in eastern Iowa. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can provide that by clicking the evaluation link in the YouTube video description. And let me say a couple words about our organization. So Practical Farmers of Iowa is a nonprofit organization. We're based in Ames, Iowa, but we work all across the state and in surrounding states. We specialize in farmer-to-farmer knowledge sharing and farmer-led research with a mission to equip farmers to build resilient farms and communities. Whether you grow corn or soybeans or carrots or flowers or raise sheep or cattle or anything, all are welcome at PFI, and we'd love to have you be a part of our community. We invite you to learn more about our organization and access our vast collection of resources at practicalfarmers.org. So make sure you join us again next Tuesday. We are going to be live from the farm of Roger Wilcox between Pearson and Correctionville in Northwest Iowa, where we are going to learn about small grain harvest and post-harvest handling in the Little Sioux Valley. Until then,